In today's lesson, we're going to be working with solving systems of linear equations like we've done in the last few days, but this time we're going to have to change one of the equations first. So this is number 10 in your student journal note-taking guide. You can see that the x's are lined up, the y's are lined up, the equal sign is lined up, and your numbers are lined up. But you also can see that x and 2x are not going to cancel out. 2y and y are not going to cancel out. So what we're going to do is we're going to change one of the equations by multiplying every part of that equation by the same number to create something that will cancel out. So we're going to take the first one, for example. We're going to multiply everything in that first equation by a -2. Okay, so you might be wondering why -2? Well, when we multiply x by -2, we get -2x. And as you see, these will now cancel out. We're going to have to multiply everything by a -2 though. -2 times a 2y is going to give us -4y, so -4y, equals, and we have to do -2 times the 20, and that gives us -40. Okay, so now we're going to take these two equations right here and combine them, and what's going to happen is the 2x's are going to cancel out. Now remember, this is a 1y, so this is 1y minus 4y. That's going to give us a -3y, equals, and then 19 times -40 is going to give us -21. At this point, we have one step to solve the y. We divide each side by -3, and we're left with y equals 7. So there is half of our answer right there, y equals 7. Now we have to take that 7 and pick one of the two original equations, and we're going to plug it back in. I'm going to pick the second one, simply because I'm not going to have to multiply that 7 by anything. So I'm plugging it back into 2x plus y equals 19. So that's going to be 2x plus 7 equals 19. We're going to subtract 7 from each side. It gives us 2x equals 12. And then we're going to divide each side by 2. 2's cancel out, and we get that x is equal to 6. And so now we have our answer, the ordered pair 6, 7. Now we're going to move on to number 11. And one thing that I may not have pointed out too well in number 10 is that we had to multiply that by a -2 because the x and the 2x were both positive, and so we had to get a negative in there because they have to have the opposite signs in order to cancel out. So on number 11, the same thing's going to happen to us here, because again, we have our x's are lined up, our y's are lined up, and our numbers are lined up. But all the signs are the same. You have both of these are positive, both of these are negative. So we're going to have to multiply one of the equations by a negative something. We have to get that sign changed so that they will be able to be canceled out. So it doesn't matter which one we change. I'm going to go ahead and change the first one. Now, on this one, we're going to multiply everything by something that we actually have to multiply both of them. We actually have to change both equations because I can't make a 3 into a 4. But what I can do is multiply this top equation by a -4, and then the bottom equation by a 3. And here's what happens when we do that. -4 times 3 is a -12. X. -4 times -2 is a positive 8y. So we put plus 8y equals, and then negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8. We've changed that first equation, but I still don't have, I can't cancel these out because they're not the same number. Same thing here, and I can't cancel out the numbers ever. So we're going to change the second equation by multiplying it just by a positive 3. I don't want to multiply it by a negative 3 because that would just put me in the same position. It would make the x negative, and I want one of them to be negative and one to be positive. So 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times negative 3y is negative 9y. And 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. Now I have two equations where something can cancel out, and that's the x's. Negative 12x plus 12x is 0, so those cancel out. When I put my other ones together, 8y minus 9y gives me a negative 1y equals 8 minus 12 is negative 4. One step, we can't have a negative in front of the y. We can divide each side by a negative 1, and I get y equals 4. So I have half of my answer right there. Now I'm going to take that 4 and plug it into one of the two original equations. It doesn't matter which one we plug it into. I'm just going to go ahead and plug it into the first one. So I have 3x minus 2y equals negative 2, and we're putting the 4 in place of the y. So that's minus 2 times 4 equals negative 2. Well, negative 2 times 4 is a minus 8 equals negative 2. Now we're going to add 8 to each side. 8's cancel out. 3x is equal to 6. We divide each side by 3. And we get x equals 2. So my answer is the ordered pair 2, 4. At this point I'm going to skip down to number 16, because on 16 it's an example of one where you don't have to worry about the sign changing, because if you look at everything we got here, we have x's, but we have one positive x and one negative x. Y's, one positive, one negative, and then our numbers line up. So I just have to take one of them to change, and the easiest one on this one to change is the second one. I need to make this 2 into a 4, and I do that by multiplying by 2. Everything is going to get multiplied by 2. So that second equation is going to change to negative 4x minus 10y equals 14. And I just want to point out that if you don't multiply every single number by that 2, all three of those parts, you're not going to have the right answer. So everything gets multiplied by the 2. I'm going to rewrite the first equation, but I don't have to change anything on it, because the negative 4x and the positive 4x are going to cancel out. Now negative 10y plus 3y gives you a negative 7y, and 14 minus 7 is 7. We finish it out by dividing each side by negative 7, and we are left with y equals negative 1. Either one could be plugged back into. I'm going to go ahead and plug it into the first one. So I have 4x plus 3y equals negative 7. And we're plugging negative 1 in for y. So 4x plus 3 times negative 1 equals negative 7. When I simplify that, 4x, 3 times negative 1 is a negative 3, so I'm going to say 4x minus 3 equals negative 7. Add 3 to each side. 3's cancel out. 4x equals negative 4. Divide each side by 4, and your answer is x equals -1. So your answer is the ordered pair, -1, comma, -1. So you've had an example of one where you had to multiply everything by a -2, to change them all. And if you had one where the signs just were the same but the numbers were also the same, you could multiply everything by a -1, or just change all the signs. In this case, we had to multiply it by a -2. Example 11, we had to multiply both equations because I couldn't make a 3 into a 4, and I couldn't make a 4 into a 3, or a 2 into a 3, or a 3 into a 2. So I had to multiply both equations, and you just use the numbers that are already in the equation to help you. Multiply the first one by a 4, -4 because we had to change the sign, and then the other one by the 3. We just use those numbers to help us figure out what number we're supposed to multiply by. And then finally on 16, we only had to change one of the equations, and we didn't have to multiply by a negative because they already had opposite signs. So we just had to multiply. We had to identify the fact that we could take 2 and make it into a 4 simply by multiplying by 2. You will now have an assignment of about 10 questions where all of them will have to be changed in some way. Some of them will have both equations that need to be changed, and some will just have one equation that will need to be changed.